All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick are reading our preview and prediction for the 2024 Big Ten title game between Oregon and now Penn State after Ohio State's hilarious loss to Michigan. The Nittany Lions are 4-point dogs. 51.5 is the total. 8 p.m. Eastern Time on CBS Live from Indianapolis. We'll go ahead and start with that Penn State offense, Nick. You know, this is a team that they're quite frankly shocked that they are even here. So obviously they don't have much of a game plan established for this opponent. But I guess the same thing can be said for the Ducks. I think Penn State's going to be able to come into this game and play a little bit looser than they previously would in big-time games. And that's going to do with Drew Allar, who he's been up and down in big-time games this year. You know, early on in the season, went on the road to Morgantown and put on a phenomenal showing. Looked great against USC. Was, an average game against Ohio State in a game that they probably should have won as well. Past couple weeks, though, he's been great. 3 straight games of 200-plus yards. Hasn't turned the ball over. The one against, Maryland, just shy of 200 total yards. But this is a guy that has phenomenal talent, obviously great size, projects to the NFL very well. But at some point, he's really going to have to step up and, win games at a higher clip than we've been seeing in terms of his high upside performance, Nick. And I think this is a great opportunity for that to happen. Obviously, Bayou Prabola, he'll see a lot of snaps as well in terms of different sets when it comes to running the football. That's a wrinkle of this offense that I think is pretty underrated. But what do you think that he's going to be able to provide in this game in a neutral site, closed doors, so no weather is going to be a factor? This is an opportunity for him to step up and take down a big-time opponent.
Penn State certainly didn't wake up this morning expecting to be playing in this game. Rival Ohio State was battling rival Michigan. Was a heavy favorite, a double-digit favorite in that game at home, and somehow Ohio State blew that, and now Penn State fans are kind of like, hey, all of a sudden we're going to Indianapolis, and this is a big opportunity for Penn State, a program that's not played in the Big Ten title game in quite a few years, and a really big opportunity for this program, hoping to, make a deep run in the college football playoff. James Franklin and company find themselves in this conference title game with a new opportunity to be Big Ten titles champion, which is not what they expected earlier on, just a couple hours ago, really, before this the slate of football was played today. Drew Allar, I think he's been a good quarterback this year, right? He's been really solid. Prior to today's results, 72% comp rate, about 2,600 yards passing, 17 plus touchdowns. Really solid, only 5 interceptions on the season, so he's been really solid protecting the ball. He's been very accurate, right? 70+% comp rate is a really solid number. He doesn't put the ball in harm's way a lot. He's really looks comfortable in the pocket. He's a really solid quarterback. He's not really, elevating the team per se. Based off the stats, you could say that maybe he is, but I think he's more of just a quarterback that's cool, confident in the pocket, not going to go out there and make anything crazy happen. Just going to get the job done, be a serviceable quarterback, lead the way for the team. He's a good leader on the field as well, a solid captain for this team, and they've been able to produce on the field, and it's been really helping this team so far. They also have that backup who's a really solid player, and running sets, the 2 quarterbacks have 7 rushing touchdowns between the 2 of them, so there's a lot you can get out of that as well. This is a Penn State passing attack that's been playing pretty good football this year.
You look at his weapons, the biggest question was, does Penn State have enough firepower to take down these top opponents? And they got inside the 5-yard line twice against Ohio State and got 0 points. So I guess the question would kind of be yes, because they kind of blew that one. But I think it's still out for debate. Tyler Warren is the top tight end in the country, approaching 1,000 yards, over 80 receptions. This guy is the go-to target. And he's not just a tight end. Obviously, they put him everywhere. They'll put him at fullback, halfback, quarterback, whatever. The back half of the season, he's been phenomenal after a bit of a quieter start to the year. This guy's going to get a lot of targets. He's going to command maybe 15 targets if they have to throw it that much. Harrison Wallace, Amari Evans, 2 solid pass catchers. Wallace has really emerged as that number 2. Other than that, there's not many guys you can look to here. Julian Fleming hasn't stepped up. Liam Clifford's really not anything good. He's just out there to run reps, I guess. The receiving group's not all that good, Nick, but with Warren putting up production like this, maybe he could do it all by himself, because that's what he did against USC. 17 receptions for 224. The guy was snapping the ball, running downfield and catching it himself. That's not a joke. That actually happened. So I think they could probably single-handedly win the game with just him.
Yeah, Tyler Warren's a damn good player, definitely carrying this receiving core. Even say that as a tight end, this is a guy that gets a lot of targets for a reason. Nearly 1,000 yards receiving. He's really solid, 5 touchdowns as well. Prior to today's game against Maryland, where I believe he had a touchdown or 2 in that one as well. So he gets a lot of targets. This is a guy that they rely on a lot. He can play in a bunch of different sets. You can put him on the slot in the interior. You can move him around. He's really can do it all for you. A really good tight end, and certainly a guy you can rely on. The rest of this room, Harrison Wallace, I think, is solid, about 600 yards receiving for him, a couple touchdowns. Amari Evans, same deal as well, a couple touchdowns. more of a deep threat for them. He has 20 plus yards per grab so far this season, so he really, when they hit him, they use him in solid stride there. Nick Singleton's a decent receiver out of the backfield, has a few touchdowns here and there, which I think is certainly helping the team as well. Julian Fleming, really disappointed in what he's done. He's just not really worked out well at the college game after having a really good high school career. Really wonder what he could look like. And Liam Clifford really kind of feels like he's out there just getting cardio at times. Doesn't really have a whole lot of targets and catches so far this season, although he does have a receiving touchdown. I think this is a decent enough passing attack. I like what they have here with Warren. I think he can really lead the way. As long as they're accurate and Warren has a solid day, this team will be competitive with anybody in the country.
Now you look at a Penn State rushing attack. Everyone knows that this 1-2 punch of Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton, in terms of talent, is one of the best in the country. They do a pretty good job of running it up on woeful opponents, but against the better defenses, they just don't show up. And really, since Saquon left, their rushing attack hasn't been that great against good defenses. UCLA, USC, Ohio State, Minnesota, all held them to under 120 yards rushing. Those are probably the top 4 defenses they've played all year long. You expect them to be complementary, and that's really how this offense has to, operate. I love how they've kind of evolved from really a run-first offense to being able to get something out of their passing attack, showcasing great growth in that area. But they're going to have to find the ways to get these backs involved because they're too good not to get touches. Running straight downhill is probably not going to work against Oregon. Nick Pribola, of course, he's going to get involved a little bit. They got to find some creativity to try and attack this defense on the edges. But, historically, they've probably, they're going to struggle in a game like this. So, they got to find ways to get this run game going, but it's likely not going to happen.
They have to find a way to get this run game rolling. This is an offense that relies on the run. These two backs, they're very similar, really similar stats. Each, 640 yards plus on the season. Each have 5 touchdowns at least. They're having solid games, about 60 yards per game for each running back. So they're, solid numbers here. They complement each other well. Allen and Singleton are really solid. Singleton a better back in terms of receiving, and he has double the grabs in the season, so you can see him certainly be involved in the passing game a little bit more than Allen is. But both are really talented backs. They're going to have to run the ball a lot if they want to have success against this Oregon defense. I think that's one of the big keys here is can Penn State run the ball effectively over and over again? Will that help them out in this game? They're about 27th in the nation, about 190 yards per game this season, so a really solid number. They're going to have to find a way to continue to do that. They're going to have to continue to run the ball over and over again if they want to have success against this Oregon defense.
I'm just going to start with this offensive line. Drew Shelton, the left tackle. He's not that great against the run, but a respectable pass blocker, though. Ola Iona on the interior. At center, Nick Dawkins. He's been, average player for them. Sal Wormley. You got 2 veterans at guard that have really impressed this year, and then Anthony Doka at right tackle has been pretty good. So I think this offensive line, are they built to, dominate running the ball against this opponent? Probably not, but I think they can certainly be respectable in terms of pass protection and occasionally opening up some lanes to keep them ahead of sticks.
I think this is an opportunity for this offensive line to stand up and be strong in this game. It's a tough task, certainly, but they're a physical unit that has some really good pieces. Drew Shelton's a really good player at left tackle. Expecting a good day out of him.
Now we move to an Oregon offense, exploding for 49 points against Washington. Dylan Gabriel, 209 yards, 2 touchdowns. The rushing attack had 200-plus yards. This is an offense that's been kind of confusing this year because Gabriel at one point looked like the Heisman favorite after he put on a clinic against the Buckeyes. Since then, though, they've been, held to under 40 points in every single game, 38, 39. That 49 I alluded to, you had 16 against Wisconsin, so they've been quite consistent on the scoreboard, but one thing is they, open up these games quite well, and they just slow down, and I don't know what's the issue with that, because if that translates over to this opponent, it's not going to be great, because more than likely, it's going to be, more hard-fought than it has typically been this year. Dylan Gabriel, though, having a great year, 24 touchdowns, only 6 picks, over 74% completion rating. Of course, they have great weapons, Evan Stewart, Trayshawn Holden. Stewart emerged against the Buckeyes. Has also been kind of quiet since then, but he's a highly impactful player in terms of talent. And then Tez Johnson, he's been a little banged up. Looks like he should be a full go after missing 2 games in a row. Had a couple of catches against Washington. He's going to be a slot warrior. Penn State did pretty well defending the Ohio State passing attack. Oregon, though, they certainly have different ways they can hurt you because Terrence Ferguson's a very good tight end, and Tez, again, in the slot. He's a complete matchup nightmare in his route running ability, so this will be an interesting chess match here for Tom Allen's defense.
This is a good passing attack, although a bit weird at times. This offense feels like they're really good, but they also feel like they aren't, if that makes a lot of sense. The stats seem a little deceiving. 280 plus yards passing per game, about 15th in the nation there. So that's a really good total. They do throw the ball a lot. Gabriel's having a good enough season, over 3,000 yards passing, 22 plus touchdowns, 6 interceptions on the year, 74% comp rate, depending on what the math looks like on your end. So still really solid, really accurate, similar to Drew Aller, very accurate. Has a couple more yards adding to that portfolio. Still, you expected maybe a little bit more to Gabriel. I don't know. It feels a little sloppy at times with him. He spreads the ball out to a lot of different pieces. There's no one dominant player here. Yes, Tez Johnson's, the leader with 64 plus grabs and about 650 yards on the season, 8 scores. But Evan Stewart, Trayshawn Holden, Terrence Ferguson are all not that far behind. They really do like to get Ferguson involved, who's a really solid tight end. Holden, I've been happy with what he's been able to do. Justice Lowe as well has been a decent piece at times for this team. So they have a bunch of different guys they can throw. They have a really balanced passing attack. They can spread you out, hit you in a couple different ways here. I like the way that Dan Lanning's kind of built this offense. They're scoring about 34 points per game, a decent enough number in my opinion. It seems like sometimes they take their foot off the gas and avoid running the score up against some of their weaker opponents, something that I've noticed, only scoring 35 against a really bad Purdue team, 38 against the Illinois team that they were beating. You could expect them maybe to have scored more points in those matchups. They kind of take their foot off the gas a little bit, in my opinion, to kind of lower that number a little bit. Still a really talented passing attack through the air that is having a great season.
They were on fire in that game against Purdue. They could have put up 80, it felt like, and they just cooled off tremendously. So something's going on with this offense. It's certainly going to be hard to be in sync as much against Penn State as you've seen against these other opponents, though, and again, it eventually falls off, it seems. Look at the running game, over 160 yards per contest. Jordan James approaching 1,200 yards, 13 touchdowns this year. I think this is a phenomenal running back, 210 pounds. He's very physical, hard to bring to the floor. Noah Whittington, pretty respectable number 2. It's been banged up for most of the year, and then Dylan Gabriel's a pretty live runner at the goal line. But for the most part, it's the Jordan James show. Very tough run defense they're going against, but they did a pretty good job when they played the Buckeyes of running the ball, especially on that left side, led by Josh Connerly at left tackle. Left guard's kind of been a revolving door. Marcus Harper's really struggled. Najad Strother seems like he's a better player at that position. Iai Laulu at center, they put him in favor of a guy who departed in Jackson Powers Johnson. And he's been great as a replacement center this year as a first-year player. Marcus Harper's also been abysmal at right guard, so the interior might be a little bit weaker, and I think Penn State can certainly look to exploit that. Johnny Cornelius, though, at right tackle is also great. And, of course, we have a phenomenal pass-rushing group. Nick, this is going to be great matchups here. I know the scouts will be in the building watching these tackles against the edge rushers.
This is an offensive line and rushing attack that's a really solid group. Jordan James is really solid for this team, nearly 200 carries, 1,000 yards for him, 11-plus scores, really solid. Noah Whittington's been good. It's an offensive line that's really physical, a really strong unit with some great pieces on the interior, some physical tackles as well that really set the piece. Cornelius, the transfer previously at Rhode Island, he's having a great season again. He was a really good add. Prior to last year, he had a really good 2023, having a great 2024 as well. A really big, physical, solid right tackle that's continuing to prove himself as a great player. This is a really big physical offensive line. It caps off a really good offense. Even if the numbers are a little bit odd and they're a little off-putting at times, this is still a great unit on paper.
Now you move to that Penn State defense, a group that's been splendid all year long. Back in week 2, Bowling Green had a lot of success for some reason, and then USC was able to keep that a close competitive game with some explosive plays. And other than that, they really haven't been cracked too much, even though Ohio State was able to run the ball quite well against them. It was kind of concerning how they were kind of getting sliced up for 176 yards in that one. This is a team that's incredibly built in the trenches, though, to withstand a challenge like this. You look on the interior, starts with guys like Keziah Izzard, Zane Durant, Devon J. Thomas, Vanover. They're pretty deep at these positions up front, but more importantly, it's going to be the edge rushers and Abdul Carter and Denena Sutton. Carter, of course, is a finalist for Player of the Year, adding another 2 sacks against Maryland, bringing that total up to 10 on the year. Oregon's going to look to slow these guys down, and I think they certainly have the matchups to win one-on-one. But I think on the interior, Nick, they've certainly been tested at times this year. I certainly think that they are still big and strong enough to handle this matchup against sometimes what's a weaker front for Oregon. But at times they've been concerning this year. Do you think Oregon's going to be able to exploit that, or do you think these edge rushers will have to do more damage against the run to have a full impact?
These edge rushers are going to have to be good against the run. I like what this defensive lineman will do. They're a very physically strong unit, led by Carter, who's really good. 48-plus tackles for him, 20 tackles for loss, 10 sacks on the year. Really good numbers for him. Also has 3 pass breakups. He really can find a way to get his hand up and bat a ball down. Zane Durant, 31-plus tackles, 9 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks plus. On those numbers, Danny Sutton has been really solid as well, 21 total tackles, 6-plus and 3-plus in terms of tackles for loss and sacks for him. Devon Alias, Alonzo Ford, Kozai Izzard are all really solid pieces that are good in rotational reps. This is a strong unit. Those two top guys, though, Carter and Dennis Sutton, are really incredible pieces. They got to be strong here. They got to continue to put a ton of pressure on Gabriel, try to stuff the run at all opportunities. This has to be a physical defensive line that stands up and wins the battle against an equally physical offensive line, and see what they can do in that situation.
In the middle of this defense, I know a lot of people have been impressed by what Kobe King's been able to accomplish, especially as a run defender. Pretty good in coverage as well. Tony Rojas, has been really struggling against the run, hasn't been an effective tackler. Dominic DeLuca will get on the field as a number 2 linebacker, and he's made some big plays. A pick against Wisconsin, for example. What do you think about this linebacking group? Because, the defensive line is going to be a tall task for them. They're not going to be able to do it all, though. They're going to have to be sound, especially toward the boundary, and not overstepping gaps on the interior, because Jordan James is going to be able to rip off a couple of runs occasionally, no matter how good you are.
Kobe King's a great leader for this team. 60-plus tackles, 8-plus tackles for loss, 3-plus sacks for him. Good numbers on the season. He's a good leader. Tony Rojas has been solid in coverage so far this season, around 40 tackles for him, in addition to 5 tackles for loss. He's a solid piece. DeLuca's been really good plugging him in coverage. A solid rotational rep. Like you said, that huge pick against Wisconsin. That was a solid. That 30-yard return put the team in a good position there. I like this linebacking core. Solid unit here.
Now you move to a secondary. They're going to have tough challenges out wide defending pass catchers. You're going up against Ohio State. I was certainly worried about how they would defend those wide receivers outside of A.J. Harris, who ended up having a pretty good game. And for the most part, they didn't crack really much. Zayon Tracy, when he got on the field, he was very good. Cam Miller, certainly a guy I think could certainly be attacked. The slot mainly, though, with the matchups against Tez Johnson or something you want to watch. That's where Cam Miller's going to have to come up big. Well, that was a good amount of receptions, but not much yards after catch, and he's a pretty good tackler as well. Tracy, though, for the most part this year against the run hasn't been good, so I certainly think that might lead to him being left on the sidelines more often than not, which is not great because they need him out there and passing downs. Zakee Wheatley will play a lot in the slot. But A.J. Harris, I think he'll be in for a stout performance against Evan Stewart, but when Jalen Kimber is matched up with him, I'm a little worried about how that might go. Elliott Washington, I think he's been a consistent player for this secondary. And then the safeties, I think these guys are tremendous. Jalen Reed, Zakee Wheatley, probably one of the top duos in the country no one's talking about. What's the expectations for this secondary, Nick? Because when Oregon's not able to tear it up out wide and these guys are playing stout, it might be hard for them to move the ball.
Secondary certainly has to be strong on the exterior of the field, certainly out wide on the boundaries. They got to be good here. They got to be strong. Jalen Reed is a great leader for this team, leads the team in tackles, 70-plus tackles for him. 3 picks as well, 2 pass breakups. He's been really solid. Wheatley's been really good as a complementary partner. 60-plus tackles for him. Second in the team in tackles. 2 safeties lead the way. Certainly good numbers there. A.J. Harris has been solid for this team at times. Zayon Tracy, I worry about him, certainly against the run, but I think there's still opportunities. Kimber's been okay. Elliott Washington's been impressing me. He looks a little bit better in coverage. 5-plus pass breakups for him, leading the team in that category, a guy that's a really solid coverage asset. I like to continue to see him develop and grow as the year goes on. This is a secondary that's having a decent season, in my opinion. They're getting better as time goes on. This is a tough test, though. Certainly, they're going to face a battle here. That this passing attack for Oregon can pick you apart if you're not careful. They got to be strong, be confident, make sure you make your plays on the boundary, and have a solid day if you want to be competitive in this matchup.
They look at an Oregon defense, a group that's been phenomenal this year. Have not really allowed too much outside of the Buckeyes game. You can't really think of too many opportunities where opponents have been able to expose them. This run defense, on the stat sheet, it's one thing, is against Ashton Gianti. Certainly struggled back in week 2. Purdue, they were able to put up 200 yards on some nice runs to the boundary in that game. Wisconsin, I think, had a nice game plan in that contest that they nearly lost, where they gave up 130 rushing yards. Oregon, though, they're incredibly stout. It's led by Derek Harmon and Jamari Caldwell. These 2 transfer additions on the interior have been tremendous. Mateo Uyungale off the edge. He's really emerged as a playmaker for them. Not as much against the run, but certainly as a pass rusher. T.I. to him. T.O.T. He's been great as well. And then Jordan Birch, whenever he's been on the field. Some other guys like Amari Washington, Amari and Winston. This is a defensive line that certainly has a lot of talent. They have good size. It's really just the Caldwell show along with Harmon, Nick, and you've seen it against Washington where they were in the backfield on every single play, it seemed, generating a lot of negative plays, a lot of sacks. They had 10 of them along with 16 TFL. A much better offensive line they're facing here, but that's the kind of damage they can have if you're playing bad.
They can have really good damage there. Tioto is a really solid player. They can move him around. 45-plus tackles, 5-plus tackles for loss, 4-plus sacks for him. Good numbers there. Derek Harmon's a really good disruptor. 36-plus tackles, 7 tackles for loss plus, and 3+ sacks for him. He's a good leader, as well as 4 pass breakups at least. So he gets his hand up there, really solid on the line. Mateo Ugalele has been really solid as well. 31+ tackles, 11+ tackles for loss, 8.5 sacks at least. Really good numbers for him. He's super physical, has a pick as well, a key pick against Wisconsin that really helped them in that game. Jordan Birch, Jamari Cardwell have been really solid for this team. Each of them have a bunch of sacks and tackles for loss, while Kieran Ware-Hudson has been solid in rotational reps. This is a big physical defensive line here. They're facing a huge unit in the trenches on the offensive line, certainly. Can they win that battle? I think they can. I think this is an opportunity for them to step up, and that could be the biggest difference maker for me and why I think Oregon could really have a strong day here. I like what this team can do in the trenches.
Middle of the defense hasn't cracked all that much. Jeffrey Basso's really coming around since converting from the secondary to the middle of the defense. Bryce Bocher has been a tremendous leader for them in all regards. Devon Jackson, probably the weak link in their linebacking core, but he's third string for a reason. I think this group will be in for a solid day. Bocher potentially being matched up with Tyler Warren will be interesting. But these guys really just need to be effective in, shooting the right gaps, tackling. The responsibilities aren't going to be too heavy in this game, because I think the D-line's going to do a lot of the heavy work, but the linebackers will still play a crucial role in this game.
Bocher, leading the team in tackles, 70+ tackles for him. He's a really good leader for this team. He's solid in coverage as well with 4+ pass breakups. Want to see what he can do against Warren. Jeffrey Bass has been really solid as well, at least 45 total tackles for him, 2 pass breakups, solid numbers there. Jackson, decent rotational reps, 35+ tackles is not a bad number for him. Also a decent coverage asset if you want to swap him in on, third down potentially, or maybe in second down, something like that. I think he's a good piece to have. I don't hate this linebacking core. I think it's a solid unit here.
Now you move to a secondary war against Washington. They gave up 17 of 20 passing for 201 yards, but Williams did a lot of that on the move. Alar, he can certainly be effective on the move, and that certainly didn't bite Oregon in the back too much because they're playing the Huskies. But in a game like this, Alar can certainly hurt you with his movement and his pass catcher's ability to adjust. You look at their corners though, and non-off scheduled sequences. Jabbar Muhammad, Nico Reed, that is the Colorado transfer, has been great in coverage this year. I think Reed's been a real splendid player against the run as well. Dante Manning will occasionally get on field. Pretty good corner there. Also, Brandon Johnson in the slot, been a great leader since his transfer. Kobe Savage has been a good player. Tysheem Johnson. I mean, this is a veteran group, Nick. They really all came together after 12 games. I think this is going to be a tough group to get past. These are all veteran players. Of course, a lot of them are transfers, but right now they seem to be clicking at an incredibly high rate. You think that Penn State's going to be able to expose that at all? Because I haven't seen a player like Tyler Warren at tight end all year. That might cause some issues.
It certainly can cause some issues. I think it's something you have to keep an eye on. I do like this secondary. They may be tested here. That may be a tough test. Warren is such a unique player at tight end. May pose some problems. Tysheem Johnson's been solid for this team, 50+ tackles for him, 3 interceptions as well. He's been really good. Kobe Savage has been solid as in coverage as well. 50+ tackles for the safety. They move him around. He's a solid piece. Brennan Johnson, they're probably one of their best coverage assets with Jabbar Muhammad. The two of them are great coverage assets. Muhammad, 9+ pass breakups for him. Johnson, 5+ as well. Each of them have at least 30 tackles. Solid numbers there. Nico Reed's been solid, 5 pass breakups for him. Deontay Manning has 6 pass breakups. So solid numbers there. Certainly a tough test. It's a matchup. Keep my eye on. Can they survive this matchup against Warren, who's a really good, phenomenally strong player? I think they can be strong in this matchup, but it's certainly something you have to watch. If they start to get beat by Warren, if he has a lot of mobility and freedom across the middle of the field, it could be a very long day for the Oregon Ducks.
Look at the tail of the tape, the team comparisons. I'll give Oregon the nod at quarterback, running back. I'll also go ahead and side with Penn State. Wide receiver and offensive line for the Ducks. D-line, I'll call that even because I think both teams are really well built out and they have plenty of strengths with great players. Linebacker in the secondary, though, I got to give it to the Nittany Lions.
This is a fair tail of tape. I like what we see here. Defensive line is certainly even. I think you have to give that even no matter what. You can make the case for both teams, but I think even is really what you have to do in this situation. Quarterback, running back, I think I like where it's at. Same thing with wide receiver. Linebacker, I think it makes sense to give it to Penn State, although you can maybe start to make the case for the top 2 on Oregon. Secondary, I think definitely goes to the Lions. I like these tail of the tape comparisons. I think these make a lot of sense to me.
Looking at the final thoughts on the prediction. Keys to the game for Penn State, the Aller-Warren connection. You need to look to that early and often. And the defense just needs to wreak havoc and, put Oregon in, long passing situations. And for Oregon, the pass game needs to get back in sync and kind of stay in it at a higher rate. Interior D-line can really dominate, I think. So they got to overwhelm in that area. I'll take a stab at the Nittany Lions in this game, Nick. Neither of these teams were expecting this to be the second representative in Indianapolis, and I think that might play into their advantage at some point. If you've seen the Minnesota game, they faked a punt deep in their own territory late, where if they don't get it, they lose the game and potentially are knocked out of the CFP. And here they are now in Indy. And I'll go ahead and give them an opportunity to win this game. I think their defense is phenomenal. I don't think it's a flawed group at all. And I think that this interior offensive line is much improved. I think Aller is capable of stepping up and winning big games. And I think that Franklin's going to tell them to come out here and play more of a free-flowing game, take more risks. And I think that's something they've been afraid to do over the years because of the losses to Ohio State, for example, the inability to make the playoff. So let's take some risks. You've seen that a week ago. Maybe Franklin's coming out of that shell a little bit, and I think that will lead to a Big Ten victory, and that would be the number 1 seed as well.
Certainly a matchup that a lot of people are not expecting. This is the Penn State's second ever appearance in the Big Ten title game since the conference made a conference title game in 2011. They hadn't had one previously. Where back in the day under Joe Paterno, they definitely racked up quite a few conference titles. They won their first conference title game against Wisconsin in 2016. Trace McSorley, a really good player for that team in that year. This is an opportunity for them to get another one. Obviously, Oregon, they don't have any Big Ten title games since they just joined the conference. Makes a lot of sense for them. But this is a big opportunity for them. They want to go out here and win this game. For them, the way they see this is an opportunity for them to stamp their foot on this conference that they just joined. When you look at in the past, they won Penn State climbed conference titles in 1994, 2005, 2008. So this is a team that has a good history with that. I do like Oregon in this matchup, though. I think Oregon is the better team on paper. They're number 1 team in the country, undisputed number 1 team in the country. There's been nothing to really show me that they're not the number 1 team in the country other than a close game against Wisconsin. But on the road late in the year, I'm not too disappointed by that performance. It's a pretty decent Wisconsin team that I think is underrated in my opinion. I like them to dominate the passing game. I like them to have a solid day against the run and running the ball as well, and they'll win this game by a touchdown. I still think they're the best team in the country. I think they're certainly in line for potential disappointment in the playoff. And I don't think I'm going to pick them to win a national championship right now, but I think they have too much steam to lose this game, even though Penn State is kind of playing with house money right now. They can really do whatever. It doesn't really affect them. I like Oregon in this one. I'll take the favorite. I'll take the team that's been the best team all year across the country, but I would not be shocked if Penn State go out there and make this a game.
It's going to be it for today's episode. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.